Hello and welcome to today's ISV Solutions on Azure Marketplace webinar. My name is Scott Ellis. I'm a Senior Solution Architect with Citrix Systems based in Melbourne, Australia. Today we're covering off powering new ways to work in Azure, so looking at ways to securely deliver mobile applications and workspaces. Thank you for your time today. We're going to cover off the following agenda in roughly a 30-minute period. And we've got some Q&A at the end. So we're going to look at some common business drivers and considerations around running Citrix workloads in Azure, the core capabilities that Citrix provides in running these workloads on Azure, talk through some of the cloud economics, so briefly provide an overview on the Citrix cost calculator that's been created for Azure. And we'll step through some of the Microsoft and Citrix resources that are available for customers and partners who are considering or already running Azure Citrix workloads on Azure. And we'll allow some time at the end of the session for Q&A via the chat window. Okay, let's look at some of the core business drivers we're seeing from customers today around developing strategies for running their Citrix workloads on Azure. The first one is cloud scalability. So obviously deploying in the cloud allows companies to turn up resources to cope with increased demand, but they're also able to turn those back down as that demand passes. We're seeing that this elasticity allows organisations the ability to burst to cloud, so becoming very popular. Cloud economics is tied closely with the cloud scalability. Organisations are able to see significant cost savings rather than buying or investing capital expenditure in hardware that is often underutilised or only utilised for short portions of any given time. Using that dial-up and dial-down capability, many organisations are seeing some real economic benefit in utilising Azure to run Citrix workloads on. Azure also allows customers to focus on core business. So the lack of available systems or real estate, sometimes it's personnel or expertise, is a common challenge amongst our customers. So providing companies with a dynamic resource on demand capability, our customers are able to focus on what matters most, which is their business. One of the probably most common drivers we're seeing today is, or even a benefit of just scaling out existing on-premise environments, is around business continuity and disaster recovery capabilities. The nature of public cloud has this capability built in. So if you build out workloads, application and desktop workloads in Azure, you're able to quickly scale those up in the event of a business continuity scenario being invoked or DR recovery being required. So in the event that organisations don't have access to their buildings or their technology resources, through automated processes you can quickly spin up workloads that can meet those business requirements. And it's a very cost-effective manner as well, because when that situation, the disaster is addressed, and the environment is back to the status quo, the resources that have been spun up in Azure to provide additional application and desktop capabilities can be turned down or turned off altogether. Another common business driver we're seeing is around testing and development. So having the ability to spin up production quality environments and write code for end user acceptance testing, with the ability to migrate easily into a live environment, is providing a lot of flexibility for our customers, and is a very compelling driver for them to start moving workloads to Azure. There's also a few hurdles we need to take into consideration when looking at moving our Citrix workloads into Azure for public cloud. Studies have found that more than 90% of organisations are already running cloud applications of some sort, or at the very least they're experimenting with cloud adoption. For about 80% of these companies, a hybrid cloud strategy is following. So whilst many of our customers have a very strong cloud focus, they're realistic in the fact that for a period of time at least, they'll need to run workloads both in public cloud in Azure, but also on-premise in their traditional environment. And this isn't necessarily immediately dependent on Citrix workload components. Typically, it's tied to back-end databases that line of business applications are dependent on. And the project or the strategy around moving applications and desktop workloads into public cloud typically needs to be in line with the migration of those back-end databases. Projects that must also take priority. Part of this process is cloud governance, cloud security and security policies around these workloads, any additional optimization and integration testing that's required, the connectivity between traditional on-premise environment and Azure, so some additional testing in some of those instances, and also ensuring that any additional uncertainty such as risk on cloud infrastructure, architecture and compliance processes are addressed as well. At Citrix, we want to empower our customers to be able to use the infrastructure that they want with the same efficiency as deploying those on-premise or as a Citrix as a service capability through Citrix Cloud. We're going to touch on each of these capabilities in a little bit more detail. Firstly, let's take a look at our application delivery on Azure. So many of you on the call will be familiar with the fact that Citrix NApp is able to support hybrid cloud deployments today, and it's a very popular approach for many of our customers who are moving to Azure today. NApp workloads on Microsoft Azure give IT organizations a strategic advantage since it enables agile desktop and application delivery. There's no steep learning curve to manage a hybrid type environment. We're using the same management consoles and the same skill sets that our customers have used and partners have used for traditional deployments of Citrix. So it's a very easy process to introduce or step to introduce by starting to run some of these workloads both in public cloud and on-premise. And we'll touch a little bit further on some of the capabilities we introduced there. By centralizing control with NApp, administrators have a number of benefits. Obviously paying for just the compute storage and network resources that are used, but we're able to introduce some additional orchestration and management to deliver both traditional and cloud workloads as well. We also introduced some cross-platform management capabilities across private, public and hybrid cloud models, and we make it easy to move existing and future workloads to the cloud as it makes sense for your business. So as I touched on a little bit earlier, as those back-end line of business databases, as an example, are migrated into Azure, we can easily migrate workloads from traditional on-premise environments into Azure as well. Let's take a quick look at some of the licensing models that Citrix has available. Traditionally, if we move from left to right on this slide, the on-premise implementations traditionally use perpetual licensing. Customer managed the IT, the updates were managed by IT as well. Typically single tenant type scenarios, and very much a traditionally private cloud type environment. More and more we're seeing customers and partners use infrastructure as a service. So stand up these environments utilizing NApp workloads and additional components, management components in an infrastructure as a service model. So again, using perpetual licensing and single tenancy, but not on their own infrastructure, moving that to public cloud. If we then look at a lot of our Citrix service providers, how they deliver Citrix solutions to our customers, they're leveraging a multi-tenant environment. They typically use a subscription type license, so a monthly charge, and they more often than not are partner cloud. We're seeing a wide adoption of those partners utilising Azure as well, given over the last 12 months a lot of the Citrix capabilities that have been introduced into or supported in Azure. Not limited to NetScaler, but also machine creation services capabilities within XenApp as well. So a big focus there from our partner community. More recently, we've introduced Citrix Workspace Cloud. So that's a subscription-based service, and we'll touch on that a little bit further on and go into a bit more detail about how that operates and how you're able to run Citrix workloads out of Azure. Let's take a look at each of these models in a little bit more detail. Here you'll see a typical XenApp or Zen desktop architecture broken down into the user layer and the hardware layer with the different capabilities or different types of different methods of delivering application and desktop workloads. We'll just quickly step through the different breakdown on the hardware layer of how this is delivered. So if we break this into the 4 different scenarios, traditional on-premise, top left, where all these components are being delivered out of the customer's data center. If we look across to the cloud-hosted Zen desktop, this environment is, so the workload component is being delivered out of an infrastructure as a service type model, where all those components, the resource layer, the control layer, and the access layer are all consuming some type of infrastructure as a service. Stepping across to Citrix Workspace Cloud, as a subscription service, Citrix provides access and control hosts and a component of the access layer as well, which is optional. The key thing here is that we're not delivering those resource components. So those Windows desktops, Windows apps, Linux desktops, or remote PC access is still delivered from the resource location you choose. And we'll delve into this a little bit further in a bit more detail. But the key thing to remember here is that we're providing a management control plane as a service, not delivering those desktop workloads, and I'll touch on reasons why we've taken that approach a little bit further on. The last model here is where that entire access layer, resource layer, and control layer and the hosting components are provided entirely by a service provider. So this is a popular model with many of our customers, where our service providers are delivering those workloads and the management control plane in its entirety out of Azure. And from an end user perspective or a subscriber's perspective, all I need is my end device and effectively a URL and a method of authentication. And I've access to all my applications, my desktops, my productivity, and my line of business applications. And they're all provided by that service provider. Recently announced in the last few weeks, Citrix has provided a Citrix proof of concept, or XenApp proof of concept or trial environment out of Azure Marketplace. So if you go into Azure Marketplace and you do a search for Citrix, you'll see that there's an option there for XenApp 7.8 trial. By selecting that and providing some environment variables around accounts and passwords that you'd like to use, the zones you'd like to run up the workload in, you're very quickly able to spin up the necessary workload components, some infrastructure that will actually provide you a fully functioning XenApp proof of concept environment. So it has a NetScaler component, an Active Directory component, and then the necessary delivery controller and workload components to very quickly spin up a demonstratable environment. The great thing about this solution is it's fully validated and tested. It's a very simple evaluation process. You're able to quickly do some application compatibility testing as well in this environment. So if you're wanting to test some applications on version 7.8 of XenApp, very easy to upload your applications into this environment, provide access to some user acceptance testing groups, and then customize and extend this environment as well. So you'll see there that after a period of time, this environment spun up. It's created a controller virtual machine, domain controller virtual machine, an optional jump box there, a NetScaler virtual appliance, and a couple of XenApp workloads. So one of those is a hosted share desktop, and the other one is a server VDI desktop. The great thing is that these are templated environments. You can come in and modify these and expand this environment, so you can extend these to additional workloads if you so desire. But what it does mean is that this entire environment can be stood up in less than half a day. So you can come in and provide access to the testing either for your specific set of applications or whether you're wanting to come in and test NetScaler features and functionalities within Azure. So great capability that's available today. Strongly encourage you to try out that environment. Citrix Workspace Cloud. So as I mentioned earlier, subscription-based service. I guess the key differentiator here is that we're not delivering or we're not taking on the responsibility for delivering application and desktop workloads. We allow administrators a single admin console. It's the entire Citrix service platform, so that's traditionally that's Desktop Studio, Desktop Director, the delivery controllers, SQL Server, all those components. Provides the licensing required for that environment to function, and a single platform or single console for administrators to create delivery groups and workspaces for end users, and allows for this environment or the environment to be stood up very quickly and have access into a range of resource locations. So we don't stipulate where those resources need to run. It could be applications, it could be desktop operating systems on-premise, it could be server workloads running either in private clouds or in your own data center or in public clouds. The great feature and function here is that those resource locations aren't prescribed by Citrix. We have a connected process, which I'll touch on shortly, that allows us to manage each of those components. So if we look at a traditional deployment of XenApp or XenDesktop, it typically meant that those workloads were running in public or partner clouds or on-premise and private clouds, and each of those workload environments typically had a management layer as well in each of those locations. So to help remove that duplication and simplify the management process, what we have done with Citrix Workspace Cloud is provide that management control plane as a service. A number of benefits, obviously much quicker to stand up these environments and expand your environment, but the other key component is around having an evergreen capability as well. So the fact that that is managed as a service by Citrix means that as new features and functions are released, you're able to realize those features and functions almost immediately, so that new codecs or optimizations around video or voice that you may want to realize in your environment can be realized as soon as those features are released in Workspace Cloud. You're not having to wait for typical server or operating system refreshes to realize the benefits of those new features and functions. So a great way to manage workloads in a hybrid type environment, as an example, where some resources are still on-premise and the remainder of your resources are sitting in Azure, or your new workloads are moving to Azure, but having a single management control plane for those resources. Similarly, having a single point of access for subscribers or end users to the service. So if we take a look at this environment from another perspective and just have a look at some of these individual components, you'll see there that the SQL Server component, the licensing component, Desktop Studio and Director, and delivery controllers are all responsibilities that Citrix takes on as a service. What we introduce into either your Azure environment or your on-premise environment which we refer to as a resource location, is the concept of a connector. That allows us the visibility to see desktop and server workloads in those locations. Also lets us interact with Active Directory. The other key function of that connector is it provides us performance metrics that allow us to, or the administrator of the environment allows the administrator to see performance metrics in a range of locations. So from an end user perspective, I'm coming into a, if I was using the web receiver, I'd be logging into a single page, launching perhaps 3 or 4 different applications from 3 or 4 different resource locations, some of those public, some of those private cloud, some of those traditional on-premise out of my own data center. From an end user's perspective, where those applications run are completely transparent to me. But the great thing from an administrator's perspective is that I have visibility of where those applications are running for that particular user and the type of performance or end user experience that the end user is having for each of those applications, even though they're running from 3 or 4 disparate locations. So some great flexibility from an end user perspective, but also from an administration perspective as well. Okay, another key component that we need to look at is obviously we're introducing some additional network components into a hybrid environment where we're running workloads over multiple locations. So having some network optimization and some network security capabilities are pretty key. So just briefly for those on the call who are not familiar with NetScaler, NetScaler has been around for over 14 years now, providing a range of features, not limited to, but including load balancing, application acceleration, bunch of security features, SSL optimizations, high availability, and some performance, some key performance optimizations as well. So typically, in these sort of scenarios where we're looking at expanding into Azure, we can introduce some business challenges around distributed computing among clouds and servers and storage, and networks can be difficult to interrogate or integrate when we're dealing with a hybrid type environment. And it's important that we have application metrics or metrics around application availability and performance. If we're running applications and desktops over a range of resource locations, we really want to be able to see what that end user experience is in each of those locations and ensure that we're meeting the requirements of end users' expectations. Security is pretty key as well. Obviously, we need to make sure that we're meeting all our security and compliance requirements, and we want to make sure we keep on top of rising operational costs by protecting data theft, but also optimizing the environment so that we can leverage as fewer resources as required during periods of low demand, but scale those environments up quite quickly and provide optimal load balancing where those loads are increasing seasonally. NetScaler provides some proven network optimization and application delivery. It helps address security and performance requirements around hybrid cloud delivery solutions. Allows you to extend the cloud when you need it for scalable and flexible working, a range of advanced load balancing capabilities. Also introduces a range of network visibility capabilities as well. So we introduce a capability called HDX Insight that allows us to extend visibility of end user experience. So NetScaler is a key component in delivering that capability. Also providing unified management where we're dealing with a range of resource locations. We really need to be able to manage and monitor applications and desktops across all of those environments. So having a unified management capability is key, and NetScaler is integral in helping us deliver that capability. Since May of last year, the NetScaler has been available from the Azure Marketplace. So again, as you saw in one of the previous slides, if you go into Azure Marketplace and search for Citrix, you'll see that the NetScaler is available there. The benefits are that it uses the same code base as traditional on-premise the virtual appliances or physical appliances. So we're finding that it's an easy transition for customers today who are already using NetScalers on-premise, whether it be for load balancing capabilities or for secure remote access or a range of features and functions. They're able to easily transfer or transport those configurations from their traditional deployments in their on-premise environments and transition those across to Azure and run those up in Azure. So I guess a common question is, what sort of features and functions are available for NetScaler in Azure? Here's a bit of a summary list of those. Probably the top right there's the most common one that many of our existing Citrix customers today utilise, and that's the SSL VPN capability or the ICA proxy. Having a single point of entry for access to all your applications and desktops, regardless of the type of device end users are coming in from, is a great feature. Providing that common user experience is key, and also providing the visibility of that or the insight analytics that you see there. So being able to determine whether application performance is occurring at the data center end of the experience, or is it something that's happening between Azure and the device, or is it something that's occurring on the device itself, or something that's being that's causing a general issue to a common user group, maybe a branch location that's experiencing a problem. So having those additional insight analytics is pretty key. A bunch of other features, a range of other unified gateway, some optimizations around URL rewrite and compression, and obviously a range of integration points with multi-factor authentication as well. So some guides a little bit further on in the deck that you can refer to around some additional features and functions that are available for the NetScaler when running on Azure. I'm just going to briefly talk about enterprise file and sync capability. So for those of you on the call not familiar with Citrix ShareFile, you're able to download implement a ShareFile storage zone out of Azure Marketplace. So if you are looking to deliver or integrate enterprise file and sync capabilities into application and desktop workloads running in Azure, you can stand up a storage zone in Azure for optimal end user experience. Similarly, you can integrate that with connectors so that you can expose or mobilize access to on-premise SharePoint resources or network file shares, utilizing those ShareFile connectors for SharePoint and network file shares. The other key thing there is that there is integration for ShareFile into Office 365 as well, so you can provide single sign-on capability from a range of Windows devices. And just before we wrap up, let's talk about cloud economics. Obviously, we've got the capability to run up, as we mentioned earlier, a proof of concept environment with all those Citrix components in Azure very quickly. We're able to test our applications in Azure running on XenApp, access those remotely using NetScaler securely from a range of devices. The next step is really understanding, once we've met all our functional requirements, is to then say, well, okay, what does this look like from a cost perspective? How much will it cost for me to run my Citrix environment in Azure compared to if I ran it on-premise? So what Citrix has provided is a high-level cost calculator. So it pulls down some recommended retail pricing for different Azure workloads in different locations. So you're able to choose different regions to run workloads. You're able to choose different user types. So whether that's a light workload, a medium workload, or a heavy workload, you can choose different types of instances that you might run those workloads on, and it will create a summary set of information for you that breaks down monthly costs for storage, for networking, for infrastructure components and workload components as well. So it gives you enough information to then to feed into a business case, or to justify either a production rollout or a pilot process to further analyse the cost component that you're looking at for running those workloads in Azure. So here's an example of an output of some of that analysis. So what you'll see here is this is a task worker, so a light workload. Workloads typically broken up into task, knowledge, and power worker. What we're seeing here is the density that we're getting from light workloads on different instances that we've chosen out of Azure. So what you're able to do here is determine quite quickly what sort of density you're going to get for the different type of workload and what that hourly cost would be per user or per session, if you like, in each of those instances. So you can quickly determine, based on a 9-to-5 workday or a 24/7 scenario, if it's a mining or medical sort of industry, you can quickly determine what the daily and monthly charges and annual charges would be to run these workloads on different instances. So it's a very quick and easy way to determine some of those cost metrics that would feed into justifying running these workloads in Azure. So just recapping today's session, conscious of time, there's a range of Citrix solutions that are available from the Azure Marketplace that can help organisations meet a range of challenges around cloud scalability, cloud economics, shifting that budget from capital expenditure to operational expenditure, allowing organisations to focus on core business, providing cost-effective business continuity and disaster recovery solutions, and of course providing a test and development capability that can be scaled up and scaled down as required. As I mentioned earlier, there's a raft of resources that Microsoft and Citrix have worked together on to make your transition to running workloads in Azure as seamless as possible. We provided a raft of information around ShareFile, XenApp, and NetScaler, and running those components in Azure and how to get those components out of the Azure Marketplace. The Citrix on Azure cost calculator, which I stepped through briefly, is also available. So if you're wanting to download that and do some of your own cost analysis, feel free to do so. And there's a range of other links there that step through various deployment guides for different components on Azure as well. All those resources are available at that URL that you see on the screen there, citrixandmicrosoft.com. All the Azure components are under the Solutions and Azure Cloud folders. So, thank you again for making the time to attend today's session. I really hope it was worthwhile and gave you a bit of insight to the Citrix capabilities of running optimized workloads in Azure. I'll be available immediately after today's session to answer any questions you might have via the chat window. Have a great day, and thanks again for your time.